Thank you, Kaylee. Look out, Buenos Aires. President Trump and President Xi Jinping are set to meet December 1st at the G20. And that really could pose significant developments for U.S.-China trade talks. Here to help us break it all down is Marc A, Caracal Global founder. All right, so what should the end goal be in this framework of the framework meeting in Buenos Aires?
I think the end goal should be peace and prosperity. So what that really means is challenging, because there's different factions, as you know, in the White House. Depends who you listen to.
Right.
Some people.
Who's the president's listening to? Who is the president listening to?
It varies from day to day.
Yeah.
I think the positive thing that came out, there's a news report today that Peter Navarro is not going to make the trip. So I think that's probably a positive sign. But certainly the USTR representative and Larry Kudlow have different ideas on how we should move forward with China.
All right, so this comes in January when you face another deadline in terms of just what exactly tariffs are going to be implemented. So I guess what would a win be from President Trump's perspective walking out of the G20?
I think a win for Trump is whatever he thinks a win is. Like, frankly, I think whatever comes out of that dinner on December 1st, he's going to say is a win. The thing we're facing now with the U.S.-China relationship, it's more than just economics, frankly. It's really getting into geopolitical issues, the future of industrial policy, as well as the role of commerce between the two nations and, you know, how we engage each other. So it's really become like a bigger issue than just the trade friction.
So, you know, I think you know this better than anybody, but I think here inside of the Beltway we miss it sometimes, which is the president going after China helps him politically, especially in a battleground state like Michigan or Wisconsin.
No, absolutely. I grew up in the Midwest. Right. I know Michigan well. I have uncles who are in the union, and they, you know, are baffled by. They're fully supportive of what Trump is doing. And I think if you look towards 2020, counties like Erie County in Pennsylvania, Macomb County in Michigan, Racine County in Wisconsin, there's huge support for President Trump and what he's doing. Certainly, there are plenty of people, even people that do work with China, that want to see a more aggressive posture from the U.S. to push back on some bad practices that the Chinese have engaged in.
When we talk about domestic audiences, of course, President Xi Jinping is essentially president for life. So who will face bigger domestic pressures first?
I think it's a question. I don't think the Xi thing is interesting. Obviously, he extended his rule, and he'll be there for much longer. But there are certainly factions in the Communist Party of China, just like we have factions here in the U.S. There are plenty of people that want to see a more robust, reform-oriented government in China. So I would listen to different voices. I think if you saw what Hank Paulson said last week, clearly at he's listening to different folks. There are folks in China that want to see more reform, and they're just as nervous, frankly.
President Xi got all of the limelight in Asia, the ASEAN and APEC summits, which President Trump missed. Was this a strategic mistake?
Well, I think obviously Vice President Pence was there, but I think it would have been important for President Trump to make the trip. Clearly, more and more of America's interest long term is going to be in Asia, in South China Sea, in India. It's important for not only the president, but frankly our entire government to spend more time in that part of the world.
What do you think in terms of how intellectual property? I mean, when I talk to Senator Mark Warner, for example, he totally slams China, Mark, on the issue of intellectual property. He's a Democrat.
Now, intellectual property is a huge challenge. I'm not going to say that. China's certainly made advances, but they're nowhere near where we need to be. I mean, frankly, our system is predicated on intellectual property rights. The Chinese system doesn't have that built into their capital system. Do I think they're going to get there? I think they're going to get there when they actually have brands that are worth protecting. They're not there yet.
There was a shift about 2 months ago, I would say, when folks were saying the U.S., by every economic indicator, would have the upper hand. And now it seems that the U.S., in terms of the PR war between the two countries, is on the back foot heading into the G20. So how does the U.S. get back the upper hand? Because economically speaking, we're still, I would argue, have the upper hand.
Yeah, following like the tick-tock of who's up and who's down, the horse race of U.S.-China politics probably isn't the best thing. I mean, certainly it's interesting. It makes for interesting tweets and news copy. But I think looking big term, these are big macro issues that we're facing, that we're trying to sort out.
So what then, I guess, from China's perspective would be a win heading out of the G20? What do they want to see happen? Because I think we're putting too much emphasis on this, because I still would argue January is still going to be the actual development of when we actually see just how long of a dispute this is going to be.
No, I agree. I think there's three big players, frankly. I think we're totally ignoring Brussels. Europe's a huge economic powerhouse.
And we're seeing China shift there.
Exactly. They should not be ignored. Certainly the G20 is an interesting inflection point, but you're spot on. These new tariffs that could come on board in early January will in fact hurt more American consumers. The tariffs that are in place now haven't really hurt the broad American consumer.
And oh yeah, there's a farm bill that should be renegotiated, hopefully during the lame duck. Marc A, Caracal Global founder and the go-to guy in Washington for U.S.-China trade disputes. Coming up, President Trump is facing blowback from members of his own party over his decision to stand with the Saudis. We'll talk with a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman Adam Kinzinger, next. This is Bloomberg.